What is going on, Diablo 2 fans? Brunski here, and today in this build video we're going to take a look at my 163 FCR Wind Druid. This is an extremely expensive build to make, but it's a lot of fun. It took me nearly 2 years of grinding on single player pluggy to acquire the specific items that I needed to make and reach certain breakpoints, but it is definitely a lot of fun to play. And like all of my build videos, timestamps will be in the description below, so if you want to bounce back and forth between the attributes, the gear, or the gameplay, they're there for you guys to use, so please take advantage of them. Other than that, guys, really do hope you enjoy this video. Let's jump in. Alright guys, so before we actually dive into the specifics of this 163 FCR Wind Druid, so the attributes, the gear, and the gameplay, there's just a few main points that I want to go over. And the first is that I'm not going to spend too much time going over the skill tree for this particular build, because I do have a previously made video on my YouTube channel. The link for it is in the description below. It is your typical 99 FCR Wind Druid setup, and I do spend a lot of time breaking down each individual skill tree for that build. And I can tell you guys that the skill tree for that 99 FCR Wind Druid is identical to the 163 that I will be showing off in this build. So it's your typical 20 Cyclone, 20 Twister, 20 Tornado, 20 Hurricane, prerequisites, 1 into Grizzly Bear, and then your rest into Oak Sage. It's the exact same setup, there's zero difference, so if you guys want to reference the skill tree, refer to that particular build video. The second point that I want to cover is that this build is primarily focused on magic finding the pits on either players 1, 3, or 7 difficulty, depending on how you want to change your gear around in your inventory, which I will break that down more later in the video. But this character is definitely capable of magic finding anywhere in the game. You know, Bale running, Chaos running, he's a great Neelathak runner. You just have to switch your gear on a little bit, but it is a very expensive character and it can be quite difficult to reach 163 FCR, and there's definitely different alternative options which I want to cover. Tying into the second point, the third and final discussion topic that I want to mention is the different alternative options that you can use to reach 163 FCR. So basically every Wind Druid build that's shooting for 163 will always be using either Trangs or Mage Fist, Arachnid's Mesh, and a 35 FCR Spirit. Those are basically the gear options that they never change. But the rest of the gear can vary depending on how you want to reach 163. Now, it's really hard for me to talk about every single particular option, but you can use either Heart of the Oak or Whizspike or Suicide for your caster weapon. So the advantage to Suicide and Whizspike is they have 50 FCR. Hodo has the res and extra skills. Ring selection, you're probably going to be using either 2 FCR rings or an FCR ring and an SOJ combination. It is actually possible to rock 2 SOJs if you use a 220 caster amulet and a 220 circlet. This particular build is using a caster amulet, 1 FCR ring, 1 SOJ, and a 220 circlet. There is the option, however, of rocking something like a 5 NATO to substitute for the lack of damage with 163 FCR build, and then using a really nice 218 or above FCR amulet. Yeah, there's really any sort of combination of those different gear choices will help you reach 163. Dive into it a little bit more when I go through my particular gear, but I just wanted to point out there's definitely different options of reaching this very high FCR breakpoint, and the particular gear selection that I have is not really written in stone. You don't have to run what I'm using. So the first thing that I want to cover is the attribute distribution, as well as the FCR and FHR breakpoints of this character build. I've started adding the different breakpoints as well in this little segment of my build videos. So kicking things off, this is a Max Vita build, which is tweaked a little bit. It's not a pure Max Vita setup, but as far as strength goes, I don't have a single point invested into strength between the base character stats, plus attributes and plus strength gear. And Torch and Annie, I don't have a single point invested into strength for this particular build, which is very cool. I actually only need 156 to equip the Runeward Spirit in a Monarch Shield. But all of my gear helps me hit my strength requirements, not a single point invested. Very, very cool, especially since 163 FCR Wind Druid. I think that's a really cool feature of this build. Nothing into dexterity. I have a total of 400 points into vitality, so when I am buffed up, when I do my double buff, I have just over 4,000 health, and then I put my remaining points in energy, so I actually have 1500 mana when I'm fully buffed. Now, you could have a little bit less invested in energy, but I particularly find that when I'm doing these runs with the faster teleporting and then slinging more NATOs, that you do gobble up mana quite a bit, so I put some extra points into mana, and that is because I primarily farm with a player's 7 difficulty setting with this character in the pits using a Reaper's Toll Merc. If I was running players 3 or 1, I would use an Insight Mercenary, which I will cover in the example gameplay of this video. And in that particular scenario, if you're using Insight, I would just put nothing into energy and then everything into vitality, because you don't really need the extra mana because you have the mana recovery bonus from meditation. But as far as the resistances go, they're kind of poor, -1, 7, 31, and 7. But with Cyclone Armor, you absorb all kinds of elemental damage, and the monsters in the pits don't really deal elemental damage to begin with, so you don't really need to worry about resistances. As far as everything else I want to talk about, I have just shy of 300 MF for players 7 difficulty. If I was farming players 3 or 1, we'd be somewhere in the range of 350 to 500, depending on how you want to tailor the inventory. FCR 163, because that is the specific breakpoint that we are hunting for. The breakpoint below it is 99, so it is a big jump to get that extra couple frames when you're teleporting, but my personal opinion, I think it's worth it. FHR, we have 65 total, which 63 is the breakpoint, or 99. Now, 99 is very difficult to reach, and it's more of a PvP thing. If you have a really nice inventory of like elemental skillers with 12 FHR, you have like a Druid pelt that has 10 FHR, you put like a nice 7 FHR all res jewel in it or something, 99 FHR might be a realistic breakpoint for you to hit. But since I don't have those types of skillers for this particular build, we just went with 63, which is totally fine for PVM. There's not really anything else to cover. I mean, nothing for absorb, Cyclone Armor does all that, takes care of elemental damage. Nothing to maximum cold res or anything like that. Yeah, that basically covers all the attributes and breakpoints. So now we'll take a look at the gear of this character build. So the gear that I have for this character build, it is very high-end gear. It's all single player self-found, which makes it even more kind of trophy-like for me. Maybe not quite Battle.net trophy worth, but starting off with the gloves, I'm using Mage Fists. If I wanted to, I could up these for more defense. I just don't see the point. Mage Fist gives me the FCR and extra mana recovery. If I wanted cold res, I could switch out and use Tranks, but again, I'd rather have the mana recovery because of Cyclone Armor. I personally don't think you need the cold res on Tranks gloves. Weapon, I'm using an Isted Suicide Branch. In my opinion, this is one of the most underrated caster weapons in the game. I have 1 to all skills, which is nice because if I use Whiz Spike, I'd have nothing. 50 FCR, 40 to life, that's boostable by Battle Orders and Oak Sage. Res, maximum mana, and then the Istrune gives me an extra 30% MF. On the 2 rings, I have 1 SOJ, which is nice for the plus skills and increase to maximum mana. The other ring is a 10 FCR, 20 to strength, and 14 magic find rare ring. This is an MF based character, so the 10 FCR is important for reaching 163. The strength helps me reach that 0 strength investment goal, and then a little bit of MF for the pits. If I was farming an area like Chaos and maybe wanted a little bit of extra resistance, could use a 10 FCR all res ring or something, but again, pits, magic finding, you don't need to worry about it too much. The belt, Arachnid's Mesh. This is actually a perfect 120 ED defense Arax, kind of another trophy item. The ED doesn't really matter on Arachnid's Mesh, but it has the +1 to skills and 20 FCR to reach that really high breakpoint that I keep talking about. These are 44 MF War Travelers, so there's a little bit of room of improvement. I want a little bit more magic find if I ever found 50s. As far as different alternative options, you could use a pair of like rare boots that have tri-res or dual res FHR and MF. Again, depending on where you are magic finding, but I'm not really worried about resistances too much with the Wind Druid, so I went with War Travelers. Enigma, obviously, for teleporting, you can't really... You can reach 163 with like a Viper Magi, but then you can't teleport, so Enigma, I mean, skills, faster run walk, MF, my favorite item in the game, the plus strength on character level. That's how we get the 0 strength investment build as well, from the 70 strength we get from Enigma. Now these are two important pieces, the circlet and the caster amulet. So starting off with the circlet, this is a 2 to Druid skills, 20 FCR, 10 strength, 24 light res circlet that has a little bit of damage reduced, and I socked it with a perfect topaz for an additional 24% magic find. Now, depending on if I wanted to do like Neolithic farming, I would take out the perfect topaz with the socket quest and put a soul rune in it for more damage reduced for the snakes. Or if I really wanted to play around hitting 99 FCR, I could socket a shale rune in it for an additional 20 FHR. But again, that's really kind of different niche builds. But that's the reason why I didn't put an Ist rune. I just went with the perfect topaz because I can always resocket it with like a soul rune for Neolithic running or whenever I want based on the different types of runs that I want to do with this build. The amulet, this is a really nice caster amulet. It has 8 FCR, which is just enough to reach 163 with the rest of my gear. It has 59 to life, 15 to mana, which is both boostable by battle orders. I got the 2 to Druid skills, I think I already mentioned, sorry. 27% fire res, the mana regeneration, which is always on caster amulets, and 9% magic find. It's a really nice amulet to kind of complement the magic finding aspect of this character build. And then we have a 35 FCR Spirit rumored and a Monarch Shield. This has to be 35 FCR unless you had like additional FCR on the caster amulet, which I don't, but it's a very important piece as well. It's why you can't really like hit 163 on without ladder only rune words. Just kind of is what it is. And then in Switch, I have a 225 FCR Spirit. FCR doesn't matter on the offhand for casting your battle orders. And then I have a CTA. This is a CTA in a flail, which doesn't actually matter because the main hand is a suicide branch. Generally, I use Crystal Sword because it's easier to distinguish on the offhand. But yeah, that basically covers all of the gear for this character build. So as far as the inventory though, it's going to vary depending on the player's difficulty that you're magic finding on, if it's like Pits Player 7 or Pits Players 1. But I have a Torch and Annie, so it's a 15-15 Torch, 19-17 Annie Charm. And then I have an entire top row here of 7% magic find, or 7 or 6, sorry, percent magic find small charms with 2 FHR. There's the 1 FHR mana, and here's, or I should have 2. Sorry, right there. Okay, they're right there. 2 FHR mana small charms. So that gives me 10 FHR in combination with the 55 on Spirit. That's how I reach that 63 breakpoint. Then I have 1 Geed's Grand Charm, and then an entire inventory of plain skillers. So ideally I'd have like plus life or FHR skillers. I just don't have any, unfortunately. Now, if I was magic finding players 3 or 1, I would switch the gear up a little bit. So again, I said I would use an Insight Mercenary. So I would probably switch an SOJ for a Nagel Ring, and then I would run different assorted MF small charms, maybe a few skillers if I was on players 3, but if I was on players 1, I would just run a full inventory of MF small charms, which would give me quite a boost to my overall total magic find. The Mercenary's gear can be very important for Wind Druid, and it's going to vary a little bit depending on the player's difficulty that you're magic finding on, which I've mentioned numerous times in this video. But my current players 7 setup for farming the pits, which normally I'm always doing players 7 pits with the Wind Druid. I think Reaper's Toll is the best weapon to use. This is an ethereal one with a Ruby Jewel of Fervor. It's just basically for proccing Decrepify. Decrep reduces monsters' damage by 50%, slows them down by 50%, and also reduces their physical resistances by 50%. And tornadoes do physical damage, so you're drastically boosting the damage of your tornadoes. And in my opinion, players 7 Wind Druid should always use a Reaper's Toll. And then I'm rocking Treachery with a G-Face with a Ruby Jewel Fervor. So these 3 pieces help me reach the 75 IS breakpoint using a Thresher. Now, if I was going to farm players 1 difficulty, which I will show a players 1 or players 3 run, I just switch out the weapon for an Insight. This is a 17 meditation, 6 critical strike Insight. It's a really nice CV. Players 1 or 3 with the exact same setup. I just swap out Reaper's Toll for Insight. He won't have Life Leech, but it doesn't matter because with Battle Orders and Oak Sage, the Merc has over 8,000 health and he can easily survive a player's 1 or player's 3 pit run without Life Leech. So I just don't worry about it. And that's why I just use the G-Face for the Deadly Strike and Crushing Blow. Again, that basically covers everything gear related wise that I wanted to talk about with this build. So now we'll show you guys a player's 7 Reaper's Toll Merc run, and then we'll do a player's 3 run with a Insight Mercenary. So I'll set the player's difficulty to 7. You can see that it's set up that way now, and then we'll go do a pit run. Now I always like to double buff. So by double buffing, I mean I cast Battle Orders, Battle Command, then I cast all of my summons, then I do Battle Command and Battle Orders again because it just helps me get an extra skill point on my Oak Sage for a little bit more life. So this is player 7. Gonna just do a majority monster clear. Doran. Let's just get a Zod on a Windred run. So for those that have played a lot of Windred and 99 FCR, I think that it's pretty evident the difference in FCR teleporting compared to the typical 99 FCR setup. The only kind of bane to the Windred is mana burn. You really need to watch for that. You just really avoid it by either running a lower difficulty setting and using Insight, or just making sure you check the monsters and kind of not tele-stomping them if they have mana burn, or just being clutch using your full regers. So Hurricane wears off, we just recast it. I guess since we're just kind of clearing everything, we'll just clear these guys out. Back. One thing that I should have mentioned, which I totally forgot to, is how much NATO damage I have. So I have 5.4 to 5.7k NATO, which the typical 99 FCR setup, it's about 1,000 more NATO damage, but then you can't teleport as fast and you can't sling as many tornadoes. So the damage per second actually evens out with 163 FCR. Okay, so there's obviously a mana burn there. You got mana burn, so you just hit full rejuve and you're okay. So that's a player's 7 pit run. I'll just do one more to just do like a little bit of a quicker run, show you guys. So double buff. So you can really see how quickly the Windred gets to the pits. Running 163 FCR setup. I could see from hovering the mouse over that boss back was mana burn, so if I had fully tele-stomped him, I lost all my mana. Which is a bit annoying, but kind of learn to deal with it. Oh, double unique. Morax and Wolves are not F. F don't care. So always want to make sure you're recasting your Hurricane. I think you can see player 7, we're not really having any issues. I think a lot of people think that with the lower damage per second, or the lower damage on your NATO, with 3 elemental, 1 to volcano, that would have been really, man, if that rolled 3 elemental, 3 to tornado, and 70 to life, shit. That would have made great fun for the video. I think it's a common misconception that the 163 Windred, because it has like a 1,000 less damage in the tornado, that it can't run player 7 pits, or higher difficulties elsewhere in the game, but clearly I think you guys can see that it's not an issue at all with this build. Okay, there we go. So that's 2 player 7 pit runs. So now we'll do a players 3 difficulty run with an Insight Merc setup. There, so I just set to players 3 so you can see it. We're on players 3 difficulty. We'll do a little bit less damage because we don't have the boost from Decrepify. But we're on a lower difficulty setting, so it shouldn't matter too much. And with the meditation aura, we can really telestomp and not have to worry too much about mana burn like we do using the Reaper's Tool setup. And Stone Skin slows us down a little bit. Not running any mana burns, kind of nice. Cast Hurricane, do the final pit run. So you could easily swap out an SOJ, remove some of the extra energy points that we talked about in the attribute distribution, and you could run higher MF, or sorry, excuse me, you could run higher life because you really don't need to have 1500 mana with an Insight Merc. And a 4-open socket Mark. But we'll do one more run just to show it off, players 3. So I do think that players 1 or 3, an Insight Mercenary, excuse me, is really good for the pits. But definitely players 7, the extra damage from Reaper's Tool, I just don't think you can replace it. This is a mana burn. I never got a chance to hit me, which is okay, I guess. It's another mana burn. You can get a chance to hit me. And so if you're running players 1 difficulty, you could easily drop some skillers and just, again, replace like the ring with a Nagel, replace some of the skillers with MF Small Charms, and get your Magic Find a little bit higher. Because our damage is probably a little bit overkill with this setup. I just didn't feel like respeccing the gear entirely because I primarily play players 7 with the Wind Druid. There's Stone Scan. Well guys, there you have it. That covers everything that I wanted to talk about for my 163 FCR Wind Druid build. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think as far as magic finding for Wind Druid specifically, I think this is a pretty GG setup. We're 0 strength investment. We hit the fastest teleporting breakpoint, 5.5k NATO, and 300 to 500 MF, depending on how you set up the gear and what player's difficulty that you magic find on. But if there's anything that you think you would change on this build specifically, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. And if you could throw a like on this video, share it, and even consider subscribing if you're new to my Diablo 2 channel. Post new weekly content and stream on a consistent basis, so there's always new stuff to look forward to, and your support with a sub would mean a lot. Other than that, guys, I'll see you on my next Diablo 2 video or live stream. Peace out.